A few months ago I released a video on the sinking of the SMS Emden, but from the perspective of the Entente, in particular the story from the perspective of the men who sank her as a part of the crew of HMAS Sydney. I have since been asked then if I would be willing to go back to tell the story from a German perspective, and so here we are, the story of the Emden. The closing years of the 19th century in Germany signalled the beginning of an ambitious naval expansion plan under the 1898 Naval Law. While much has been made of the battleships and battle cruisers built under this scheme to challenge the Royal Navy, this legislation also authorised the construction of 30 new light cruisers. See, the thing about the new German Empire was that it was too large of an empire abroad to protect a patrol by just a small group of cruisers or just some large battleships at home. Sure, it wasn't as large as the British or French or even Dutch empires, but it was still immense, stretching deep into the Pacific and Asia. This new building program set into motion a lineage of cruiser designs that began with the Gazelle class and evolved through the Bremen and Königsberg classes. By 1906, the design reached a new stage, with the Dresden class, a new, and for the time, well-armed cruiser, with additional boilers to improve speed in cruising. Ordered in a pair, the Dresden and the Emden were laid down, with the SMS Emden herself being ordered from the Kaiserliche Werft in Danzig, as a replacement for the aging SMS Fell. Her construction began on the 1st of November 1906, with launching occurring on the 26th of May 1908, her christening later being undertaken by Dr. Leo Furbriger, the Lord Mayor of her namesake city. After fitting out for another year, the SMS Emden was commissioned into the Imperial German Navy on the 10th of July 1909. Emden measured 118.3 metres in length, with a beam of 13.5 metres and a forward draft of 55.53 metres. Displacing 3,664 tons standard and up to 4,268 tons at full load, she had a distinctive silhouette with three tall funnels between her two masts, along with a small superstructure forming her bridge. Underneath the armour plate, Emden had two triple expansion steam engines powered by 12 coal-fired marine-type boilers, driving two screws. With a total output of 13,500 metric horsepower, she could reach speeds of up to 23.5 knots, which at the time for a light cruiser was far more than adequate. Emden's coal bunkers held up to 860 tons, giving her an impressive range of 3,760 nautical miles, and a cruising speed of 12 knots. This would come to help her immensely later on. Emden would be the last German cruiser to use triple expansion engines before steam turbines became standard, and this kind of machinery and range made her perfect for positions abroad, including that of the East Asia Squadron, based in Tsingtao. Armament-wise, the Emden was outfitted with 10 10.5cm or 4.1-inch SK-L40 guns, arranged for broadside fire fore and aft, supplemented by 8 smaller 5.2cm or 2-inch guns. 2 submerged 45cm torpedo tubes added an extra sting below the waterline, and she could carry up to 50 naval mines. Her protection came from a curved armoured deck, up to 80mm thick, sloping down to 50mm at the sides. The conning tower and gun shields had similar levels of protection too. All in all, for 1909, Emden was more than equipped to deal with any other ship in her class coming into service. Upon the completion of sea trials, Emden was ordered on the 1st of April 1910 to set sail to join the East Asia Squadron based in Tsingtao, in the German-controlled concession in northeastern China. Her voyage to Asia included a diplomatic tour of South America, representing Germany at Argentina's centennial celebrations, before rounding Cape Horn and crossing the Pacific. This voyage was far from smooth, and the ship had to battle through severe weather and coal shortages. Her arrival was delayed, but by July she had reached Tahiti, before the ship then continued on to Samoa, upon which she met with the rest of the East Asia Squadron. Soon after she sailed up the Yangtze River, visiting cities like Hankow, before returning to Tsingtao, the port that she would call home. Emden's peaceful duties were interrupted briefly when rebellion broke out in the German-controlled Caroline Islands in 1910. Emden would be sent to bombard rebel positions and land troops alongside the cruiser Nürnberg and the older cruiser Cormoran. The revolt was subdued by February 1911, and Emden would then return again to Tsingtao. Later that year, she was dispatched to protect European lives during the outbreak of the Chinese Revolution, and she visited Japanese ports before in 1912 earning the Kaiser's Prize for the best gunnery in the East Asia Squadron. In May 1913, the command of Emden passed to Korvettenkapitan Karl von Müller, and the cruiser continued her regular peacetime patrols, protecting German interests across East Asia and the Pacific, and in general just showing the flag. But by 1914, As tensions rose in Europe and escalated following the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, Emden was the only cruiser to be stationed in Tsingtao, as the remainder of the East Asia Squadron under Vice Admiral Maximilian von Spee was at sea with his armoured cruisers Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, along with the other accompanying light cruisers in the squadron. On the 31st of July, as war loomed and the very real threat of being stuck in port by the Japanese Navy just like the Russians had been at Port Arthur occurred, von Müller gave the order to send the Emden to sea. This turned out to be a great decision by the German skipper, as war was declared on the 2nd of August. The very next day, wasting absolutely no time on the 3rd, Emden captured the Russian steamer Ryazan, sending her back to Tsingtao where she was converted into the auxiliary cruiser Cormoran. Soon after, Müller proposed that the Emden operate as an independent commerce raider in the Indian Ocean. With von Spee's blessing to undertake this task, the Emden was detached from the squadron on the 14th of August, accompanied by the collier Markomannia. Von Spee and von Müller would never see each other again, as von Spee sailed east to try and get home. Von Spee would make a decent effort of it too, but he would be cornered and sunk by 2 British battle cruisers off the Invincible class of the Falkland Islands just a few months later. Meanwhile, the Emden would disguise herself with a dummy fourth funnel to resemble a British or Australian cruiser. This would have been easy enough at a distance, but up close the unmistakable lines of the aptly named Swan of the East were very hard to hide. Emden, though, would manage, and she slipped through the Dutch East Indies into the Bay of Bengal. British shipping was completely unprepared for what the Emden was about to unleash. On the 10th of September, she captured a Greek collier carrying British military supplies. More ships followed, and transports, merchantmen, all were sunk and captured in rapid succession. One, the Kabingo, was released with the crews of previous prizes. So numerous were the captured crews becoming aboard the Emden. Then came the 22nd of September, when Emden boldly sailed into the port of Madras under the cover of night. Out of nowhere she fired 130 shells at British military targets, including oil tanks, igniting massive fires and striking a blow to the British prestige in the region. Trade in the Bay of Bengal would plummet by over 60% in just 1 month, and the local confidence in the invincible might of the Royal Navy was shaken to its very core. Emden's raids continued unabated, taking prizes and spreading alarm throughout the Indian Ocean. It was after her raid against Madras that one of the more comical events of the war occurred. The Emden, attempting to either damage British infrastructure and communications or just needing a moment and a place to refit, stopped over at Diego Garcia. Upon her arrival, it was discovered that the British garrison was completely unaware that the war had actually been declared, because the island had no outside telegraph connections. The Emden was welcomed by the island inhabitants, and she took some time to undertake a small refit, cleaning her hull of fouling and bolstering their rations with fresh fish. In return, the crew of the Emden said thank you to their host by fixing up a local small damaged motorboat. The ship then resumed operations. It was around this time that her collier Markomannia was lost, but to make up for this she captured a new support vessel, the Burresque, to continue raiding. Müller now set his sights on Penang in British Malaysia, a key port and a naval base being used by the Entente, and this would be his boldest move yet. On the night of the 27th of October 1914, he pointed his ship straight at the port and steamed into the harbour at high speed. Disguised again with her dummy funnel, by dawn the Emden was in the confines of the harbour. She had sailed into the trap to hunt her prey. Inside Penang lay the Russian cruiser Zemchuk, a survivor of the doomed 2nd Pacific Squadron and actually the Battle of Tsushima as well. The Russian cruiser was undergoing repairs and was barely a few thousand yards from the German cruiser. Totally unaware. In a daring attack at close range, the Emden launched a torpedo and opened fire. The Zemchuk stood absolutely no chance, not even to fire back, and she was devastated. Von Müller, wanting to make sure she was out of action forever, fired another torpedo, breaking her spine and sending her down in flames. Then Emden turned to make her way back to sea. Her work done, when upon departing the harbour she encountered the French destroyer Mosquet. The Emden, awarded in the pre-war for her gunnery, unleashed everything, peppering the little destroyer which stood absolutely no chance. Emden then slowed down in front of a British port to rescue the survivors. And displaying the chivalry that Müller became famous for, he then transferred them to a British ship with signed promises not to return to combat. The Penang raid shocked the Allies, delaying troop convoys and forcing the warships to divert to hunt the elusive raider. This was particularly annoying for Australian and New Zealand forces who were due to set sail with the Anzac convoy to Europe. Tens of thousands of men held up by one lone raider, shutting down the entire eastern Indian Ocean. Emden had achieved everything that she could have set out to achieve and more. In just over 2 months, the SMS Emden had become a legend, the swan of the east and the nightmare of British shipping planners, an elegant but deadly ghost on the high seas, striking unexpectedly and vanishing before enemy warships could catch her. Her campaign would continue a little longer, but even by late 1914, just after a few months, her exploits had already earned her a lasting place in naval history. But, as with all great nautical romantic tales, as with all legends, there's always an end. After releasing the British steamer Kabinga, SMS Emden turned south, slipping away towards the island of Simula in the Dutch East Indies. There she rendezvoused with the Brest to take on coal, before setting off towards Australia. Muller intended to strike the Cocos Islands, a British-controlled but Australian-effectively operated coaling station nestled in the remote Indian Ocean, with the very simple objective to destroy the wireless station there, and perhaps disrupt British patrols away from the shipping lanes. See, if he could take out the Cocos Islands radio and its ability to contact the outside world, then perhaps British ships would go and hunt him in a certain direction, and he could make his way back to happier hunting grounds. During the voyage south for 2 days, the Emden would patrol back and forth in the Sunda Strait in search of merchant targets, but she found none. Then in the early morning light of the 9th of November 1914, she arrived off Direction Island, one of the Cocos group, and the location of the radio tower. With no enemy ships or smoke in sight, Muller sent a landing party ashore to destroy the station. The force was led by Captain Lieutenant Helmuth von Moltke, Emden's executive officer, and included 2 other officers, 6 non-commissioned officers, and 38 sailors, armed with rifles and machine guns. As the group moved inland, Emden attempted to jam any outgoing messages from the station, but they weren't fast enough. The operators on the island had already managed to transmit a brief signal to just over the horizon. Though brief, the message was received by the Australian light cruiser HMAS Melbourne, the flagship of an immense convoy including the Japanese armoured cruiser Ibuki and the HMAS Sydney. And by chance, they were just 52 nautical miles away. As Emden loitered offshore, her radio operators picked up wireless signals, but believed incorrectly that the responding ship was still more than 250 miles away. Muller had absolutely no idea that there was a convoy there, as evidenced by the fact that after the battle he was interviewed, stating that he had no idea that it was there, and had it been there he would have never made for Direction Island. Instead, he would have tried to put himself in amongst the convoy, sacrificing his ship to take down as many as possible. Confident that he had time, Muller stayed his course and kept the ship at Direction Island, but at 9 o'clock smoke appeared on the horizon. Half an hour later, the silhouette of a warship would emerge from underneath that smoke cloud. Initially, the German captain wasn't too worried, because he thought it was a British light cruiser of similar age and armament of his own. Sure, the fight would be tough, but Emden with her crack gunnery and trained crew would probably have the fight and come out on top, given that if it was a ship posted to this part of the world and not the Grand Fleet in Europe, then maybe it's a ship full of reservists, maybe it's a ship full of people who don't have as many skills in gunnery. The situation was still critical though, as von Moltke's landing party was still ashore, and there was no time to retrieve them. This deprived Emden of a significant section of sailors and a key officer. Emden, lacking steam, set off towards the enemy ship, working her way up to full speed and bringing her guns to bear. Meanwhile, HMAS Sydney approached to within 9,500 yards and turned on a parallel course. Emden fired first, her guns speaking in rapid succession with one salvo every 10 seconds. With only her third volley, she straddled Sydney, and 2 shells found their mark, one destroying the R5 control station and the other striking but failing to explode. Then something absolutely horrifying happened to the Germans. The enemy cruiser missed, her shells falling short. Now, you might ask why this was horrifying. Well, that's because the shell splashes were much bigger than Emden's, which meant they weren't fighting an old British cruiser. They were fighting something new. What ship exactly though, they wouldn't find out until it was far too late. Muller's only hope was to batter the enemy ship before its superior guns would inevitably tear Emden apart. He turned towards her, attempting to close the distance, but Sydney, having had her nose bloodied, extended the range beyond Emden's effective firing limit, and using her 6-inch guns, much larger than the 4.1-inch guns of Emden, her shells began to slam into Emden's hull from a distance that Emden could not respond to. One destroyed the wireless room, another killed the forward gun crew, and a third hit jammed the ship's steering gear. With the helm disabled, Emden could only actually maneuver by using her propellers, by either powering up the left or the right propeller to get the ship around, and this took immense amount of time and steam. Despite the damage, Muller made it multiple Hail Mary attempts to close for a torpedo strike. Just one torpedo hit would end the battle in Emden's favour, even if she wouldn't survive it. Each time though, Sydney piled on the speed, extending her range and answering with devastating gunfire. By 10:45 the Emden's guns had fallen silent, her superstructure was shredded, her funnels and foremast shot away, and her gun crews decimated. Knowing his ship could no longer fight, von Muller made the decision to attempt to save as many men as possible and to prevent his ship from being captured. He ordered the Emden beached on North Keeling Island, a nearby coral atoll. At 11:15 she ran aground on the reef. The crew flooded the engines and the boilers and threw the breech box and torpedo gear overboard, burning the code books and the signal papers. The enemy ship might take them prisoner, but it would not gain their ship or their intelligence. It was at this time that Emden's collier Beresque arrived, only to see the Emden aground and on fire. In short order the Sydney set off and after her, but her crew scuttled the vessel before the Australians arrived. When Sydney returned to Emden and signalled for a surrender, there was no reply from the German cruiser. Emden's signal flags had been destroyed, but her naval ensign was still flying. The captain aboard Sydney, seeing this ensign, believed that the enemy ship had not yet surrendered, and so Sydney resumed firing until the German flag came down. During the engagement, Emden scored 16 hits on Sydney, killing 3 sailors and wounding further. Sydney in turn fired over 670 shells with approximately 100 hits. The damage to Emden was catastrophic, with 133 of her 376 crew being killed in short order in a very ferocious battle. The survivors, including Captain von Muller, were taken prisoner the next day, with the wounded men being sent to Australia for recovery, while the uninjured were eventually interned in Malta, where many of the German sailors would remain, some up until 1920. Von Mucke's landing party, stranded on Direction Island, had watched the entire battle unfold from the shore. Realising Emden was lost, Mucke commandeered a small schooner, the Aisha, and led his men on an extraordinary escape back to Germany. I'm more than happy to cover that in another video, because it does turn into quite an odyssey. If you'd like, just mention it in the comments below. In just 3 months, Emden had sailed over 30,000 nautical miles, capturing or sinking 16 British merchant steamers, 1 Russian vessel, destroying 2 warships, her actions causing a massive disruption to Allied shipping, and forcing the redirection of significant naval resources to the Indian Ocean. For those wondering, the Sydney was by far just a better ship. It was of the newer town class type, its guns were bigger at 6 inches, she was faster, she was better armoured, and in every sense of the word, Emden was completely outclassed. The moment Sydney appeared over the horizon, Emden had absolutely no chance. After the battle though, a Japanese company actually offered to salvage and repair the Emden, but a naval inspection concluded she was too badly damaged. By 1919, the wreck had almost disappeared beneath the sea. In the early 50s, a Japanese firm dismantled what was remaining of the wreck though. Artifacts from the ship still exist, however. One of the Emden's guns sit in Hyde Park in Sydney. Another one is in the property of the Australian War Memorial, along with the ship's bell, stern ornaments, and other relics including crew uniform. The War Memorial is at the time of this recording going through a massive rebuild at the moment, so the majority of these items, the big ones such as the guns, are not on display. But if you are at the Australian War Memorial, as you go into the first door into the World War I section, turn left, past the boat from the Gallipoli campaign, and look to your right. There is an entire cabinet full of a display on the SMS Emden, including crew uniform and other trinkets from the ship, and a great big model of the vessel as well. The larger items, including the gun, should return in 2026 when the new War Memorial's rebuild is complete. To honour the legacy left by the Emden's daring voyage, Kaiser Wilhelm II awarded the Iron Cross to Emden and decreed that future ships of the name should bear a large iron cross on their bows. A new Emden was built in the 1920s, and several more have followed, with each ship sporting the Iron Cross as an homage to the original. In 1921, former crew members and relatives were granted the rare privilege of adding the hereditary suffix Emden to their surnames, as a symbolic gesture recognising their bravery. The tradition was expanded in 1934 to include families of those who had died aboard. Emden's story quickly passed into legend, not just in Germany but also abroad. It inspired books and films, including Unser Emden in 1926 or Der Manne der Emden in 2012, a movie that is quite good to watch. It's not the best made, but the scenes in it are very, very good. Her exploits also even entered the lexicons of local languages. In Madras, in South India, in Tamil and Sinhala, the word Emden or Amden came to mean someone clever, bold and dangerous. In Malayalam, it came to describe something big and vast and powerful, or as big as Emden. Muller himself would become legendary too, with his capture allegedly causing a fair bit of sadness amongst the British Empire's more landed society, some finding his story similar to the grand old romantic tales of pirates from the Age of Sail. There is something to be said about an enemy captain who was so respected that even his enemies thought of him fondly. If you're after a fantastic book on this topic, and the first victory of the Royal Australian Navy, I recommend The First Victory by Mike Carlton. Absolutely phenomenal book detailing exactly what happened during this period. Thank you all for those who listened and stuck around for the tale of the Emden from the Emden's perspective. If you want that video on the return journey of the Emden's crew, then let me know. It's a proper Greek tragedy with twists and turns and all sorts of events. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you all next time.